Our guest is on the line with big news. He is Jack Posobiec. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. At Jack Posobiec on Twitter. Navy intel veteran, founder, Citizens for Trump. Jack, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Paul? You got it perfectly right. It's crazy to say that, they say maybe not live in interesting times. And so I've just started up working with Rebel Media here in Washington, D.C., and you couldn't have asked for 2 more interesting weeks than we find ourselves in right now.
It's absolutely insane. Now we've got China saying that they would consider striking North Korea's nuclear facilities. You've got South Korean citizens panicking that war is imminent. They're having to be reassured by their own government. Your sources close to the Trump administration, who were accurate on the Syria strike, are now telling you what about North Korea?
So they're essentially telling me this, that a strike is being planned and it is being discussed at the highest levels of the National Security Council. Essentially, they are passing intelligence reports, summaries, or assessments as they call them, to the president, saying that they believe that Kim Jong-un is preparing to use his nuclear arsenal to prevent regime change. And that the only way, and that Kim believes the only way to stop himself from losing power is to use those nukes. So they're telling Trump this. This is people like H.R. McMaster, people like Dina Powell that are giving this information to Trump, the same way they gave him information regarding the chemical weapons strike last week, which may have a influence on him ordering a strike of North Korea, either striking one of their ballistic missile delivery systems or possibly even the nuclear facility itself.
And this source was, as he said, proven correct with the Syria strike. You tweeted earlier, he said he was 75% sure of the Syria strike. That happened. You're saying 50% sure that this will happen. Do you have any kind of time scale, any indication of how imminent this may be?
They're talking soon. He told me about 10 a.m. on last Thursday morning that the U.S. would be striking Syria, 75% chance. And it was about 14 hours later that strike actually took place. Or 8 hours later. Then, so today, this morning, he texted me essentially. I say texted as a phrase. I'm not divulging any sources or methods here, but he basically got it across to me that it would be looking at either today or tomorrow, possibly by the end of the week.
Absolutely incredible. And as I said earlier with Alex, the polls that I've run amongst my audience, who aren't normally that militaristic, 70-30 oppose the military strike in Syria. They're now saying it's running currently at 50-50 supporting an attack on North Korea. You could make the argument that, he is belligerent, he does have nuclear weapons, he has threatened the United States. It seems there'd be more support for this than there would for the Syria attack, even though there is, I'm unhappy to say, broadly quite a consensus of support, if you believe the polls, for the Syria attack. Do you think that Trump voters will get behind this North Korea attack?
The political situation would definitely be a little different with a North Korea attack because there are indications that China seems to be pulling away from supporting North Korea. But at the same time, as you said, North Korea has not done anything belligerent. There has been no situation where they've used or chemical weapons have been used in North Korea. There are no current hostilities going on in North Korea like the current civil war situation in Syria. So to find people saying that if anything, this seems like it would turn essentially what's a Cold War into a hot war. And I think that from the political fallout that could be very disastrous for Trump as he loses a lot of his base that voted for him for the specific reason that he did not want us to get involved in more wars.
You have nuclear experts in South Korea also saying that there is a plan to strike that main nuclear facility in North Korea. Things are getting hot in a hurry. But, we had this whole military escalation, and you touched on it there, immediately after Steve Bannon, who, according to reports, and people have contested this with me, but according to reports, was opposed to the Syria strike. He was demoted from the National Security Council. Of course, this came, 6 weeks, 2 months after General Flynn, who predicted the rise of ISIS, opposed destabilizing Assad, was replaced with McMaster. To cut to the chase, Jack, is everything we've seen over the past week a reflection of the fact that neocons are taking over or have taken over the Trump administration, at least in the sector of foreign policy?
So I'm in agreement with you on that, Paul. And I've broken down a couple of videos on Rebel Media getting into this. It seems that the balance has shifted. And at first, people were talking about the Trump administration, particularly the National Security Council with Bannon and Flynn there, but also bringing in people from Goldman Sachs, people from the Bush administration, like Gary Cohn and Dina Powell, bringing them on there. It seemed as there was a balance between some of the more neoconservative wing and the nationalist wing. But once Flynn was gone and once Bannon was removed, through a lot of these leaks, a lot of these deep state tactics, a lot of the spying that was going on that was definitely illegal involved with the Obama administration, suddenly that balance has shifted, and we're seeing a major shift in U.S. policy, because now you don't have anyone in the National Security Council that's essentially providing another option for Trump. They're saying this is the way to go. They're putting generals in there, and they're basically created an echo chamber of saying we need to attack, we need to punch out, we need to use violent military force, and there isn't anyone saying, hey, maybe we can look at diplomacy, maybe we look at clandestine operations, intelligence solutions, anything else that could be done. It's no, it's got to be strikes, it's got to be big, it's got to be loud. And you don't have anybody else out there, like Bannon would have said, to say, well, maybe there's other things we can do. Maybe we can cut deals with Assad. Maybe we can cut deals with Putin. Maybe we can cut deals with China in order to bring this to a solution peacefully by putting everybody in a box rather than launching Raytheon Tomahawk missiles at every issue.
And I mean, it comes down to this. 400,000 Syrians have died in this civil war over the past 6 years, before the chemical weapons attack. Assad had been killing his own people for 6 years. The jihadist rebels had been killing their own people for 6 years. It's a civil war. That's what happens. So I don't think the big change was this supposed chemical weapons attack. You had Tillerson, even Tillerson, on March 31st, saying that Assad was part of Syria's future. That was the line just, 11 days ago? What changed 1 week later? The only thing I can see is Bannon being demoted, right? What else changed?
It's a fundamental shift within the administration, and it's a fundamental shift basically with him out of the picture and with H.R. McMaster now there. H.R. McMaster is tied to David Petraeus, who we all know from the Iraq War, and his subsequent demotion, or sort of basically resignation and disgrace. He then became a Hillary Clinton's campaign advisor. Dina Powell herself, she's on the National Security Council now. She's under McMaster. She is close personal friends, not only with Ivanka Trump, but also Valerie Jarrett and a lot of people that are involved with the Obama administration and the Bush administration. So having these people in there, it allows for them to create a way where they can feed Trump any assessments, any intel they want without any conflicting views. There's now information out that says Mike Pompeo, director of CIA, was actually in disagreement with the assessment on Syria, in disagreement with the assessment on the chemical weapons. And Paul, I know you've seen that picture of everyone sitting there watching the screen on Mar-a-Lago when the strikes took place. Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, is not in that room. So for whatever reason, the person who is dissenting about these strikes, dissenting about the chemical weapons and how exactly they were employed, wasn't even invited to the party.
It's amazing. And what really concerns me is we're seeing this kind of jingoism, which reminds me of pre-Iraq war invasion. We're seeing anyone that questions this narrative being shamed now by a significant portion of Trump supporters. You go online, you look at the polls, I've run polls. We have a cult of personality. We've got people saying, prominent people, I trust Trump, whatever he says or does. I will follow and support him, whatever he does. That's not acceptable. You can't have a cult of personality where you will follow someone off the edge of the cliff. We have to still have hope, as happened with Romney, that Trump will listen to his base. There was a huge rebellion against Romney as Secretary of State. They listened to us. That appointment didn't happen. Do you still think there's some hope, there's some space where we could have an influence and try and de-escalate this rush to war?
And I think the best thing for all InfoWars viewers to understand is that social media is, and this is my Cernovich's line. I'm totally stealing it from him. Social media is a direct conversation between you and President Trump. If you have a feeling about a certain situation, about a certain policy that you don't like, moving in a direction, you can take to social media. You can use things like Periscope, like Facebook Live, like hashtags, flash mobs, get out there, let your voice be heard. And he will absolutely see that. He will absolutely see it. I know from channels that Team Trump absolutely was looking at the massive schism that took place over the weekend between Trump supporters, and they were looking at it very, very closely. So you're seeing now, in the past, one option that operatives would use or staffers would use was leaking to the press and, you know, plan a story in Politico, plan a story in Washington Post or New York Times to disgrace somebody, get them fired. Well, now we're seeing that social media, we all know how much Trump won in part of because of social media, how that can be used as an interactive dialogue with Trump to let him know whether you think he should proceed with this or not. And I think also that that's why you're seeing people like Tillerson go out there and say things like, oh, we want regime change. But you're also seeing people like Sean Spicer recently saying that, well, this was just a limited strike. Not sure how much they're sticking with that line. It really does seem like they're trying to drive home the idea that they don't want Assad in power anymore. And if that is the case, that's certainly something that's very different than what Trump campaigned on just a few months ago.
I mean, we're seeing mixed messages every day. They say we want to get rid of Assad first, then they say the ultimate goal is regime change. The point I've made over and over again, Jack, is Assad has fought a brutal civil war for 6 years under intense international pressure every single day to step down. He's not just going to politely step down if the United States asks him to, if Russia asks him to. It's not going to happen. They're going to have to completely obliterate Damascus to get rid of that regime. And then what will come in the aftermath? What happened in Libya? You've now got slaves on the streets of Libya being sold. This was a prosperous country. This was a tourist destination. Now it's a complete ruin. Refugees are streaming out of there into Europe. That's what caused the problem in the first place, was foreign intervention. Yet we're seeing it again. And we're seeing this cult of personality where you can't even question it. You're off the Trump train, even if you say, well, no, we're just criticizing, we're trying to influence. The other thing that concerns me, Jack, is we have these reports circulating again today that Trump was influenced to launch the strike on Syria because Ivanka was sad at seeing some pictures. You know, is it wise for potentially war-starting decisions to be made on the basis of how much something upsets Trump's daughter?
You know, I think during the campaign, Ivanka Trump mostly came out there. She gave very scripted, very crafted statements. She mostly stuck on public policy issues. She talked about women's issues. She talked about children's issues. She talked about child care. I remember that was popular with a lot of voters. There was no discussion of Ivanka Trump or her husband, Jared Kushner, being involved in military decisions, in military policy. And everybody saw the pictures of Jared Kushner traveling through Iraq over the weekend, and that started the hashtag Kushner at war. And just a lot of people looking at this and saying, is that what we voted for? We voted for somebody who was going to come in, that was going to listen to sound advice, that was going to campaign on the ideas of America first, rather than, you know, have this family idea. But it seems, and what I'm seeing within the Trump administration, and my sources are confirming to me, that Ivanka and Kushner are siding more with Gary Cohn, with Dina Powell, people that they have personal relationships with. A lot of these folks have spent a lot of time in Manhattan. A lot of the time they've spent in, and a lot of them are registered Democrats. Gary Cohn is a registered Democrat. A lot of them, it's personal Manhattan socialite relationships, and it may be that they're putting that ahead of where they are, and it's hard to say. It's hard to say who then is influencing Ivanka, who then is influencing Jared Kushner, because they know that they have the ear of President Trump. So it may not be something where Ivanka wittingly was doing this, but she may have been put up to it by people that she is associated with, who then get into deeper and deeper nefarious connections. It's very swampy. It's very swampy. That's the situation, basically. And one good point here is that Steve Bannon, early on in the campaign, in the election, did not do very much to bring in those campaign supporters, those people who were out there supporting Trump, that supported the America First agenda, to put them into the White House. The White House Office of Personnel Management is being completely run by never-Trumpers right now. And so they're basically taking staffers from Congress, they're taking staffers from Goldman Sachs, they're bringing all these people in that weren't associated with Trump, that didn't want anything to do with Trump early on, and they can work to undermine him all day long and set the agenda to what they want. And that is what it means when people talk about the deep state.
It's incredible. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing on social media, on Twitter, probably 50-50 support the escalation militarily, whether it be Syria or North Korea, 50% oppose. But then you look at the polls, you look at Gallup, 86% of Republicans, presumably almost all of whom were Trump supporters, supported the strike on Syria. I reckon it's a difference between low information and high information people. If you look at all the prominent Trump supporters, whether it be Ann Coulter, Michael Savage, you know, people on YouTube, Stefan Molyneux, very prominent people with large audiences, Rush Limbaugh as well, from what I recall, are opposed to this military escalation, are opposed to the strike on Syria, and yet 86% of Republicans, according to Gallup, support it. I reckon it's high information and low information. A lot of people have just been hoodwinked into going along. Trump says it's good, so it must be good. They don't have a grasp, Jack, of this deep state tug of war that's been happening for the past 3 months, and it's turning into a cult of personality. What do you think?
Well, I think we definitely learned through the election campaign exactly how much we can trust polls when the same organizations were saying on the morning of November 8th that Hillary Clinton had a 90% chance of winning the presidency. We've seen that these people have used the polls in the past as a way of basically creating a psychological operation by essentially putting false information out to make it look like something is popular when it's not, to prop up one side or the other. And these polls have frequently been used to craft and condition opinion, public opinion out there. Say, oh, you must believe it, you have to go on with everybody else. I mean, that's a human psychological condition, that it seems it's easier to go with the flow than it is to stand up and be a voice like people here at InfoWars do. And that's why I love this station so much. And that's what Rebel Media does. And we do the same thing. We stand up there and we ask questions. And when the media and these polls were so wrong throughout the entire election campaign, why all of a sudden, if you support Trump on this, do you also agree with the polls and these media organizations like New York Times, which is owned by Mexico, like the Washington Post, which we know is financed by the CIA through Jeff Bezos and Amazon? Why are we now supporting the people that we all said don't listen to because they're putting out fake news?
And also, why are we trusting an intelligence community that was 100% wrong when they talked about Trump colluding with Russia? You know, everybody said, where's the evidence? This is just a claim. But yet suddenly, oh, they're totally believable when it comes to blaming Assad for the gas attack with no independent investigation whatsoever. The disconnect is amazing. We've got the next segment coming up with Jack Posobiec. We'll be back with the final segment of the Alex Jones Show, breaking news at Infowars.com. We're back for the final segment of the Alex Jones Show. The Borussia Dortmund team bus in Germany, that's the soccer team in Germany, has been hit by an explosion after 3 bombs were hidden in a roadside hedge. Thankfully, only one person, one of the team members, was slightly injured. They're looking at that as a terrorist incident. Over in Sweden, of course, we had the Stockholm attack last week, the truck attack. Basically, everybody's already forgotten about it because it happens on an almost weekly basis in Europe now because we're being culturally enriched. Jack, you visited Sweden recently to produce a documentary. Sweden Democrats now are the most popular party in Sweden. No surprise, they're the anti-immigrant party. After the attack in Stockholm, their approval rating has shot up. Do you think Sweden and other European countries still have time to reverse these disastrous policies, or is it too late?
You know, I absolutely think they do, Paul. When I was there producing a documentary with Cernovich Media, we called it Invasion, How Sweden Became the Rape Capital of the West. And we saw that the attitudes and the opinions of the people in Sweden were still, even at that time, this was back in January, so even prior to Trump's Sweden comments that really brought this issue to the forefront, we were actually ahead of that. We saw opinions and attitudes were undergoing already a bit of a shift. People were waking up after so many years And keep in mind, this has been going on since the 1970s in Sweden. It's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that it's really turned on at such a high clip after this current migrant crisis. So people with so quickly flooding into Sweden from the third world, from the Middle East. At this time, Sweden already is one of the least populated countries in the world. I think it ranks like 120th out of that. And people are now looking around saying our country does not look like it was before. Now Sweden is being overrun with these rapes. There was a live stream rape of a Swedish girl by 3 Afghans the same week that we were there filming the documentary. Facebook, it was on Facebook live streamed. It's actually not even being... So Facebook won't allow the live stream of that video to be released to the Swedish authorities because they're saying it's someone's private property, and they shouldn't allow this evidence of a crime, a 3-hour crime, I should mind you, to be released because it was their private video on a private Facebook page. And I think that the Swedish people at this point have finally realized that between that, between the horrific attacks in Stockholm, that it's got to stop. It's absolutely got to stop. And whether or not they have a chance left, I think that they do. I think that if Sweden starts to roll back some of the main drivers of what's bringing people there, that they will start going away. Sweden is handing money hand over fist to these people for absolutely nothing. That's the reason they're there. You talk to these people, they're not from Syria. They're not fleeing some sort of refugee humanitarian crisis. They're from all across the Middle East, and they know that the average Swede can't tell somebody apart. They say if you're Arab, you're Arab. If you're brown, you're brown to an extent. And they're putting in fake IDs. There's no vetting going on, and they're getting free money. If Sweden starts to turn that off, you will see an immediate shift. The same way in the United States here, we're already seeing an immediate drop-off in illegal immigrants crossing the border following Trump's election.
Okay, we got about 30 seconds left, Jack. Just tell people where they can find you on Twitter and where they can find your work on the internet.
Yes, if you want to go to Twitter, it's at Jack Posobiec, JackPosobiec. On YouTube, it's Rebel Media, the YouTube page. We put out very concise videos. We try to break down stuff extremely quickly for everybody so that you can get something that's very complicated but done in a very quick and easy manner. Paul, I really appreciate it. A lot of help lately, and I appreciate you having me on today.
Okay, it's a pleasure. We'll get you back on the show soon. There goes Jack.